Hello, hello, and happy Thursday, April the 17th. Ted, we're barreling through 2025 in the year of Trump. I can't believe, God, jeez, Louise, we're almost...
Time passes slower if you're in that Salvadoran prison, though.
Probably. But when you're on the outside, when you're here, when you're in the swamp, at least, it goes lightning fast. So I guess for me, I'll feel like the second Trump era will just, I'll blink and I'll miss it.
And then the country will just be gone. Poof.
Just come out and I'll emerge one day and be like, what happened out here?
I remember, didn't we used to have a country?
What happened here?
You know, you can ask the Russians. You can lose your country. Everything's still there. The dogs, the cats, the plants.
Shell.
Well, the country's still there. The country's not the government. The country is the people, the dogs, the cats. Not in that order. Cats come first. Yeah.
That's true. Well, so there's that. And yeah, the cats will survive everything. You are tuned in to the TED Manila Information Show, or TMI Show for short, where we bring you way too much information. That over there is the T for Ted, Rall, and I am Manila Chan. Thank you for tuning in. We have an info-filled show today. Our buddy Caleb Maupin is going to be joining us to talk about the alleged Trump putting the kibosh on Israel's plan to attack Iran in May. So it was upcoming, and apparently Trump put the kibosh on it. I guess we'll explore. So I don't know how true any of that is, but we had the U.S. The U.S. had those weird in-person but not face-to-face talks.
Yeah, like they're down the hall.
It's like a high school couple that split up, and you're having like the mutual friend run messages in between. That's kind of what happened last week, and Netanyahu was like caught by surprise, I think, when Trump's like, we're going to meet up this weekend. We're going to hang out in the beautiful seaside land of Oman. So that'll be an interesting talk.
Yeah, Oman. I don't know that Oman, you mean Muscat, right, is the town. Oman is the country. I mean, it's not a town, it's a city. Muscat's a city. But I wouldn't say it's beautiful at all.
Have you been there? I've been there.
I have been there.
You
thought it was beautiful? I thought it was interesting. Certainly not ugly, but I didn't think Oman was a beautiful place at all. I thought Yemen was far more striking, to be honest.
I saw the cliff sides in Oman. It's right up against the water. Mm-hmm. The culture it's
dramatic.
It's beautiful. And it's mostly unmolested
compared to Saudi
land.
Arabia, it's certainly beautiful. Saudi Arabia is gross.
Compared to Dubai, which is like Disneyland and Las Vegas.
It's Vegas.
Sans the hookers.
It's Arab
Sans
Vegas.
the hookers, and at least outright sans the hookers and the drugs and the alcohol. But it kind of looks like that.
I was going to say, what do you mean sans? It's got plenty.
No, sans, sans.
Oh, you mean Oman?
Yeah. No. Yeah. Dubai is sans the hookers and out front, like I said, outright. Listen carefully.
Saw plenty.
I know, I lived there, but that's what the whole play is. And so Las Vegas, but less on the outrageous, showgirls walking around the streets. So there's some of that. Oman was strikingly opposite. So maybe that's why I thought it was very beautiful. It was very cultural, and
Oman's real is the difference.
Unmolested.
It's real.
Unmolested.
It feels real. Yeah. Whereas
it feels
Dubai
like if you really want to see an Arabian culture.
It is Vegas. It is absolutely Arab Vegas.
Yeah. So that's where I would assume, Ted, that the Emiratis were in on the talks because it's their neighbor. It's right next to Abu Dhabi. You just go, 10 minutes down the road and you're in Muscat. So,
right. Yeah. Normally it's the Emiratis who, or the Qataris, right, who are the intermediaries in these talks.
Yeah.
But
I wonder why. So I don't know. It was interesting that they had they chose that place. So we'll talk to Caleb in a little bit, the half-hour mark. He'll be joining us to discuss all things Iran. And make sure you guys hit that like and subscribe button wherever you're consuming this content so you can help us grow our little indie channel.
Even in that El Salvadorian prison, if you're watching us, you can still do this.
I heard Nayib Bukele is a big fan, Ted.
Oh, yeah, he's all about it.
He's all about the alternative media. I'm just saying. Young guy.
Yeah.
He's in our age demo. He's male. He's in the age demo. He's probably going to be really into like those survival packages that we do ads for sometimes. And
well, yeah, although he has that whole survival thing for free in that prison. So, I mean, the 350 people have died in the last 3 years in that prison.
Oh, good Lord.
I'm sure it's just of old age and, nothing bad.
Well, that prison's pretty new. But anyway, the TMI show starts now. We'll get into some headlines before Caleb joins us. How about it? Let's roll.
American service members have been killed in a vehicle rollover in New Mexico. Another one was hospitalized in serious condition. These are the first known military fatalities under Trump's expanded mission at the U.S. border with Mexico. This all went down at 8:50 in the morning near Santa Teresa. It's a border town west of El Paso, Texas. The 3 defense officials said that the incident involves Marines from Camp Pendleton, that's in Southern California. Not immediately clear exactly what they were driving, but one person said it was not a military vehicle. Pete Hegseth said that he was saddened to learn of the tragic accident, blah, 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 hearts and prayers, blah, blah, blah. Joint Task Force Southern Border, which oversees the military's border mission from Fort Huachuca, I think is how you pronounce that, in Arizona, said in a statement that the identities of the dead service members were being withheld until they notify the families. The accident takes place as thousands of active duty troops go from everywhere from the Pacific Ocean out to Texas as Trump seals to seal the border to illegal crossings. The Marines have primarily been concentrated in California. These guys were on a reconnaissance mission as the Defense Department seeks to improve its understanding of the region, which is a complicated military jargon for, we don't know this place, we're going to go check it out and see what it looks like. The Trump administration signaled that it intends to give the U.S. military a bigger role at the southern border. Doug Burgum, Interior Secretary, went to New Mexico to transfer $110,000 of federal land to the DOD, the Defense Department, to allow the military...
110,000 acres.
Acres, that's right.
I was like, why would Burgum be giving $110,000?
Oh, well, maybe he should give $110,000.
Burgum's rich. He could do that.
That's true. He could easily do that. Anyway, the plan is to turn a 60-foot wide strip of land along the border, known as the Roosevelt Reservation, into a satellite military installation. 60 feet wide. That's very strange.
Yeah.
So it's basically either the longest, strangest strip of land of all time, or it's a voting district in North Carolina.
So I wonder, I don't know. So we're looking at this map here, for example. So I used to work there where it says Nogales. Right in there is Yuma, Arizona. And right over here, this big pink plot of land is the Tohono Nation. So they are an Indian reservation. So apparently,
it's quite large.
Yeah, it's very big. So apparently it's right up against the borderland, but that chunk of land cannot be touched by the federal government for obvious reasons. So that there's going to be no patrolling there. So they're going to have to go all the way around that little pinkish strip of land there. And I wonder where that 60 feet, Ted. I don't know if that's a typo, but
I've read that elsewhere. It's 60 feet.
I mean,
so obviously what this is about is
there
basically
are containers that are bigger than that, Ted, that come on ships.
Sure. So what they're creating is like a no man's land, basically, between the border fence and the beginning of the U.S. I've seen this in other countries, like the border between China and the former Soviet Union, where they have they have a much bigger, like, for example, when you cross from Kazakhstan to China, or vice versa, or sorry, Kyrgyzstan to China, either way, you basically will leave. You'll leave, say, Kyrgyzstan. Then you're in no man's land for 12 kilometers. Then you have the border checkpoint where the Kyrgyz let you out. Then you have the border.
Wow.
You cross the geographical border. You have the border where the Chinese check you in. Then you have 12 kilometers of no man's land on the Chinese side of the border. And then the Chinese let you into China proper. So there's like a 24 kilometer, this is a tiny version of that. All this is about is just allowing
a 60-foot
U.S.
buffer zone.
It's a road. The U.S. troops basically just have a road where they can they can amble along and respond to the fence. But, I can't imagine it's that hard to get 60 feet, when the troops aren't there, to just scramble across the street 60 feet and climb up whatever is there. It's just like a double fence situation.
Or
that's all it is.
Under.
Or tunnel under.
Tunnel but under 60 feet is not,
Yeah. 60 feet's not that far. Yeah.
Yeah. So that I just thought that was a strange thing for them to mention. The weird. 60 feet isn't anything. But the sad part is, and I know where producer Robbie stands on this.
Yes, we do.
The sad part is we're sending American troops out there into territory that they've literally never trained on, never seen, hence the reconnaissance mission. And I'll note, having worked at the local CBS station there in Yuma, Arizona, there is an MCAS Air Force base not far away. So military is there, but these guys are coming from Camp Pendleton in San Diego, which is not far. It's a hour and a half, 2-hour drive, I guess, to that point where they flipped over. But they haven't notified families, so we don't know if they were on duty at the time. We don't know if these guys were, driving military vehicles, or if they were even in their own cars, going for a bite to eat.
Well, they were not in military vehicles. That part we know. So
we don't know what the circumstances are around how these guys died. But I feel like if they're armed when they actually start their patrolling, that is just an invitation for immediate conflict against coyotes at the border. Of course, we're talking about the smugglers, not the dog, not the canine.
Well, they're not trying. The coyotes don't want armed.
No, they don't
conflict with the American troops, and they know exactly what's going on. They read the news, more than most Americans.
Well, I feel like you're inviting conflict there at the border. You're inviting. Ted, we're talking about mostly young guys who are in their early 20s that are armed. However, if they just show up,
though, because here's the thing, Manila, the U.S. loses all of its wars, so sending the military kind of means that the Mexicans are going to take us over. We're doomed. We might as well just surrender now.
So the coyotes are like, wait a minute, this is all it takes?
I, for one, welcome our new Mexican overlords.
Well, because we're not really a hand-to-hand combat nation anymore. We're a nation of armed drones at this point.
Push button.
Yeah, so we're not really a nation of hand-to-hand combat soldiers. But what country really is? But my whole point here is that these are usually 20-something-year-old boys, young boys that are like 20 years old, armed to the teeth. And you have the commander-in-chief telling you, do whatever's necessary. This is, they're surging into our country, protect our borderlands. And the boys, there's going to be a number of boys that take that seriously and want to play soldier out in the desert. So not only can they be harmed, the soldiers, but the migrants that are crossing, the people on the other side who are not even crossing, who are just kind of meandering around and looking, because there's a lot of that. There's a lot of looky-loos. I lived at the border. I know there are a lot of looky-loos that are just people that live on the other side. They just kind of hang out on the other side of the fence and they kind of just look through. I just feel like we're inviting potential disaster for innocent lives to be lost for no apparent reason when you have the troops there. And I know Robbie's like, dig a moat and throw gators in there. But Which I guess,
for the record, I don't think the medieval people ever did that. Look, I don't, I think Trump's deportation policies have been disgusting. I don't have any problem with guarding the border. You're not a nation state unless you guard your border. It's like you want to have troops there or whatever. Border officers, border patrol. You want to put Robbie's gators in there. It's all fine with me. I don't care as long as there's
gator moats.
As long as there's no environmental consequences, which the wall has had some environmental impact in some places. But otherwise, I mean, as long as they have like places for the animals so they can, go to and fro underneath or whatever, that's fine with me. It's like, it's a border. Having the idea that you should have an unguarded
for the record,
there's no law that says that a country doesn't have to guard its border.
You're allowed to guard some of those already exist. The animal crossings along the southern border, some of those already actually exist where it's, and that's not to say people don't cross them, but there are, where there is border fence, there are sections that are reserved, I guess, for animal crossing, for natural animal crossing. So there's no barrier there. So it's effectively just a giant gaping hole.
Well, I mean, it's like well, they can have a grill. I mean, it depends. Obviously most humans are bigger than most animals. So, there's a way to control that. Right. Yeah.
So, I just don't like this unless these are like the National Guard when they were deployed after J6 here in DC. And people were like, oh my God, armed military all over the streets of the nation's capital. And
it does freak me. It does freak me out, Manila. I mean, like in Penn Station here in Manhattan, we have these National Guard.
Hold on.
All right, go.
The J6 National Guard were fake armed. They did not have any ammo. They did not have any mags in their long rifles. All the ones I saw, I did not see one person with a magazine in their rifles. And then when you look at their handguns, that are, on their sidearm, there's no clip in there. So it was there for optics. So I wonder if this is kind of the same thing. That was my point.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I got to say, whenever I didn't look to see up very close, but at Penn Station in New York and at Grand Central, we have these, National Guard weekend warrior cops, with their giant weapons, and it's a little freaky, Manila, because first of all, they're shorter than their guns. A lot of them. They're like small. They're like pocket people, and they're also so young. They're like Gen Z. They're like 20, and they look. What's the word I'm looking for? Oh, right, stupid. That's the word I'm looking for. They have Mukau eyes. They look dumb as shit. Well, so like when you have like the dumbest person in the room is the person with the biggest weapon, that's never a situation that I find comfortable. I was much less worried. It's like in Israel where you see these incredibly dumb, like influencer type bimbettes running around with their with their Uzis in the streets.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And they don't even carry them properly. They're like pointing at people, sort of like, and it's like, okay, so you're stupid, and like you could end up shooting people accidentally.
Right? They're like IDF propaganda chicks that are
exactly like the hot
pinup girls.
Exactly the hot armed babes. Don't get me wrong. I have dark thoughts about them, but still,
oh my God.
It's like, it's bad. It's like, So I feel like in Afghanistan, everybody's armed to the teeth, but everyone's smart because all the dumb people have died in wars. So, so I'm not nearly as worried there.
Well, that's unfortunately not the case. When you're, I would say some of them are smart 20-year-old boys with these long rifles, and many of them are not. But at any rate, when you're a 20-year-old boy, you have testosterone surging, coursing those veins. And if they are armed with live rounds, this is going to be major conflict. And we've already heard Pete Hegseth say before he became SecDef Hegseth. That's hard to say. SecDef Hegseth.
SecDef.
But so before when he was just the Weekend Fox guy, he'd already been talking about, like, let's let's invade Mexico because we've deemed the cartels terrorist organizations. So let's just invade Mexico. And I was like, oh my God. And that's not how you do diplomacy. That's not how you do warfare when you're fighting a guerrilla effectively a guerrilla military in the cartel versus the U.S. military. So anyway, so Hegseth said that before. So now he is SecDef. And now you have 20-year-old boys potentially armed to the teeth. I don't know if they have live rounds. Again, it might just be for show as a deterrent.
I hope so.
If that's the case,
I'm sure that's not going to be the case at the border. I'm sure.
I don't like it.
There's no way it will be.
I don't like that.
Look, people are going to die. That's how it is. Mostly in car accidents. Did you know that, of the 58,000 troops who died in Vietnam War on the U.S. side, we always forget about the 2 million Vietnamese. But the 58,000, they were about 10,000 of them died in accidents.
Car wrecks?
Mostly.
Or like,
yeah. Ugh. Yeah, I mean, basically the roads were terrible. Well, and, so
all these big pockmarks in the road.
That's what happened here yesterday with this incident. Obviously, the roads are bad.
It is bad roadage out there. I've been out there. I can attest.
Yeah, so I mean, I think they're going to try to pave those roads, right? And so because you need to. I mean, I would if I were there. I'd want those roads to be.
Well, that's usually what we do, right? When we go build bases somewhere, we turn it into a little town. So if I don't know if it's going to become a permanent base, but
it's not really. But just that little. It's a strip. It's not a base. It's a strip.
Well, that's what they're calling it. Is a base.
Okay. Well, they can call it anything they want. It's 60 feet wide. I mean, Hulk Hogan could reach out and touch each side of it. Like hello.
All right. So we'll leave that there. Ted, this one I just wanted to show real quickly since people forget we're still kind of we're in a trade war. Let's face it, especially with China.
Yes, there's no kinda about it.
So I thought I'd show this this visual capitalist map of export dependency. As Trump's tariffs are taking effect all over the place. So these are the countries and what their dependency on exports look like. South Korea, a whopping 38% of their economy relies on exports coming into their country. The EU, close second at 37%. They rely on a lot of stuff to be brought in.
That's surprising.
Mexico.
I would have expected the EU to be a little more self-sustaining, wouldn't you? Yeah. I mean, it's so big. They have so much. They have so much great agricultural land. You just and obviously these are modern industrialized countries.
Yeah, so I'm curious to know what
with
they're
importing. With a lot of variation in climate and stuff. What are they importing?
Like, what are you guys bringing in? You guys make cars. You guys have farms. You guys. So I don't know. Mexico, I'm really surprised. 33% of their economy is reliant on exports. Big country.
Imports.
Well, rely on exports coming into their country.
Well, imports. Yeah.
So Canada. Well, this whole thing is called an export dependency map, or not map, but graph.
That's kind of like Canada? It's a misnomer.
Canada, 26% of their economy is reliant on
that makes more
importing
sense.
Crap.
You've been to Canada.
Yeah, but that's more than a quarter of their economy.
Yeah, but I mean, honestly, what Canadian car manufacturers are there? Or,
That's true.
Right?
You mean you can't subsist on a diet of maple syrup?
or
hockey?
Or beer. You probably could subsist on a diet of beer.
UK 23%.
I'd like to try.
That makes sense.
What?
I get the UK having roughly a quarter of their economy reliant on importing crap in because they're an island and they don't,
However, again, like Europe, in modern industrialized society, lot of variation, different climates. Again, a little surprising.
And here, Japan, 18%. You lived there, I think, Ted, or at least worked there.
I spent a lot of time there.
Back and forth, yeah. China, only 14%.
That's not surprising at all.
And the U.S., I was surprised. We're only reliant on 11% of our economy is reliant on imports. I was actually surprised about that.
Yeah, we're pretty self-dependent. We're pretty
independent.
We're independent. Yes, we are. We don't really need any.
But it just seems like
we shouldn't. And that's been one of my arguments, is we import a lot of crap that we don't have to have. Let's face it. We don't have to import cars. We make cars. We don't have to import. Just there's so much stuff that we bring in. It's just optional.
I would advise everybody, if you want to see more about this, go check out they're my favorite graphics maker. Sorry, Rick. I know Rick is watching right now. My friend does graphics, Rick. Visualcapitalist.com. That's where you guys can see the export dependency of major economies in the world. And see what that breakdown is and why. I was most surprised that the U.S. was only 11% reliant on importing stuff.
Really?
I thought for sure.
Well, there's dependent.
My impression.
I think dependent is a funky word, right? Well, when you say dependent, do you mean like if we didn't have it, like we would like not eat or something like that, or do you mean we just import 11% of everything that's produced? Well, that's sold here in the U.S. Those are two different things.
Yeah, that's fair. I don't know how they actually define this because it's a long read.
Dependent is like down. You know what I mean? Like
you what
in other words, dependent is like it would be a problem. Like say Japan.
But my son is dependent on me.
Japan is dependent on energy imports. If they don't import energy, everything comes to a halt. Right? They can no longer keep the lights on. The U.S. is not. The U.S. can absolutely lose all energy imports. The lights stay on. The factories keep moving. Everything's still fine.
That's fair. It's a long read, which I haven't gotten to the nitty gritty, but it's there for you if you guys want to go look it out. Visual Capitalist. I enjoy that. And Ted, let's move on. We got our guest waiting in the wings. Let's do this quick story.
Okay, let's do it. The facility was to have been sited in a former paper mill in the town. International Recycling Group, also known as IRG, says that tariffs imposed by Trump would have increased the cost of their equipment.
Oh, wait, you got to start at the top, though. That's because.
Here we go. Oh, yeah. So a U.S. company has canceled plans to build a $300 million plastic waste recycling plant in Erie, Pennsylvania. That's up in northwestern Pennsylvania, north of Pittsburgh, citing concerns about the financial case for the project because of cuts in federal funding and tariffs. That, according to the Erie Reader. All right. So anyway, it's supposed to be in a former paper mill. IRG said tariffs would have made the equipment expensive. Also, the EPA was supposed to cough up a $192 million loan, but Trump's freezing that kind of stuff. Finally, there was a lack of supply and demand for its products because there's a decreasing interest in sustainable environmental stuff due to Trump. Over 4 years ago, we brought the IRG project to Erie with the intention of creating high-paying, family-sustaining jobs and turning Erie into a leader in environmental sustainability by replacing new plastic production with reused and recycled materials gathered from homes across the region, said IRG Chief Exec Mitch Hecht, like Anne Hecht, right? He added,
she was
Hecht. I don't know. Well, let's say Hecht. I'm personally devastated after 18 years of working to bring this vision to a reality that we failed to overcome these challenges. If it had moved forward, it was supposed to create 250 jobs and converted 160,000 tons of plastic waste into 100,000 tons of recycled plastic. By the way, there are environmental problems with these kind of businesses that people don't like to talk about. But anyway, Brandon Mendoza,
I do.
Chief Executive of Erie's Regional Chamber and Growth Partnership, said his organization was frustrated by the financial pressure building due to economic uncertainty at the federal level. He said the project had significant support at the state and local level, and to see it pulled is a significant loss. I mean, yes, if you're one of those 250 people who would have gotten those jobs, you're bummed, but it's only 250 jobs, really.
Yeah. But I've done a whole 30-minute special about the scam that is American recycling or even EU recycling, because at the end of the day, what actually happens is more than 90% of supposed recyclables are not really recyclable. And especially in the case of the EU was shipping their shit off to Turkey and China. And it got to the point that China was saying, we're not taking any more of your crap because we're trying to clean up our own environment. We're literally not taking your stuff. We're not going to, because it just ended up in landfills. In other words, they were just offshoring otherwise landfill material to China and Turkey. That's the EU.
It's a highly problematic business. Yeah.
Yeah.
By the way, Manila, I can't believe that we're not. I just want to congratulate you on making the Washington Post yesterday.
Oh, God. I'm always the face of Russian propaganda, Ted.
You looked good in the photo. That's what's important.
I was good hair day.
Good hair day for sure. Looking good. I was a little bit like a xenomorph. You know, like some people, like every time you see them photographed, they look. Is that the same person? And that's you. You're totally like, it's kind of like it's almost like your husband might feel like he's cheating on you when he's with you.
Oh my God. Yeah, that's why when we were dating, I made it a point to look like my real self because I didn't want him to be, to be confused by the lady you saw on TV. But yeah, God, this is the real Manila.
By the way, it's really funny because they characterize in the Washington Post that you and the dude in that picture,
Ed Martin,
were that you guys were spreading propaganda. And what's so funny is when you look at the chyron on in the screenshot.
Yeah,
literally there's it says it's literally quoting you at the U.S. side of it and saying what Syria is being accused of. So it's literally like a contradiction of its own story.
I know. It's and Ted, the Washington Post, they know that I'm here in DC. They know I'm local because they don't even need long distance calls. None of them called me for a quote.
Oh, I know. It's like I know. Like honestly, my high school newspaper advisor would have kicked me in the ass for not calling the subject of a story for a comment. Yeah.
Journalism 101.
You're not hard to reach. It's like me.
Not one.
I can't tell you.
One of them.
Whenever they write about me, they never call or write.
Yeah.
They never call. They never write.
They always just want to slag me off and just never whatever.
Because someone who's someone who's 12 wrote that story. So that's the problem.
Unfortunately, the bylines are mature adults. But anyway, we were talking about trash, right? I mean, Washington Post. There you go.
There you are. Moving along.
Trash. Talk about
anyway.
Trash.
All publicity is good publicity, Manila. I meant the congratulations. You should make the most of it. You should tweet it out.
It's pretty hilarious.
All right, here we go.
I don't want to give them ammo. One last fun thing. Story.
Food and drink sometimes taste different on the plane. Usually more bland, which is, by the way, one of the reasons people always want tomato juice only on the plane. I'm one of those people. But ginger ale maintains a crisp, dry flavor that makes it known for being even better in the air. I agree with that. It all has to do with the way cabin conditions affect our taste buds. Humidity inside the plane is about 20%. In other words, it's very dry on the plane, although this can dip even lower. The dryness combined with low cabin pressure, in other words, low air pressure, reduces oxygen saturation in the blood, which lessens the effectiveness of your taste receptors. A study by Lufthansa, the German flagship carrier, found that typical cabin conditions stop your taste buds' ability to process salty flavors by about 30% and sweet flavors by about 20%. And a 2015 study found that loud noises in your standard cabin impact the body's chorda tympani facial nerve, which also lessens the intensity of any sweet tasting fare, which might be why people are so stressed out on the plane, right? They're not only they're jammed in like sardines, but also if you're bugged by noises, everything's bugging you all the time. And planes are loud. There's the roar of the engine. There's all the ventilation stuff going on. In the case of ginger ale specifically, passengers say it tastes less sweet than normal when they're flying. However, taste buds may not be able to sense the sugar, but it still has a sharp, extra dry flavor, which is thought to feel more refreshing than ginger ale does on the ground. Although I like ginger ale on the ground. The crispness comes from the slightly spicy nature of ginger flavoring. I like real, like fancy ginger ale, like in the bottles, those, those yuppie ones.
Really,
those are so good. It makes ginger ale an especially popular beverage aboard the plane. Many travel guides recommend ordering the drink in flight for its unique flavor. I don't know about that. I've never heard about that. Like, oh, when flying, always why not check out a ginger ale? But but certainly the tomato juice thing, we all know that.
Well, no, this other thing that I was watching here says tomato juice will actually dehydrate you because of its saltiness. So,
but you don't. But it doesn't. It for a lot of people, tomato juice is too salty on Earth.
I don't
but
like
when they're flying, they because of that thing they talked about, it cuts the saltiness and sweetness receptors. It doesn't taste as salty up in the air, so it tastes better.
Not into it on the ground or in the air. I always drink ginger ale on the plane.
How about V8 juice? Do you like that?
No.
Oh, I like V8 juice. If you're hungover, there's nothing like V8 juice too.
Yeah, that's what they say, but I don't know.
That's what I say.
But I do like me some ginger ale on the airplane. So I understand why. So there you go. I thought that was a fun story. So Robbie says we have to do a word from our sponsor. So let's add Robbie to the stage for just a moment and get that done.
No. He's bringing our guest. I'm gonna read it because I want to.
Are you doing that?
I'm reading it through New York style. Really, yeah, we're doing it fast. So we're just so Robbie, put it up, and I'm ready.
Word from our sponsor. Here we go.
Robbie, bum, bum, bum. Here we go. Okay. Weak coffees for the week, and at Rumble, weak has never been part of the mission. No fillers, no fraud, and no settling for mediocrity, just like 1775 coffee. It's single origin, small farm, hand-picked, specialty grade coffee that stands for quality free speech and calling out BS when it matters. Forget stale, mass-produced beans roasted just enough to hide the flaws. Dark roast hits like a Trump tariff. Medium roast keeps it bold without the bitterness. And Vitality Mushroom Blend, real energy and lasting focus, no synthetic garbage. For K-Cup pods, whole bean, or fresh ground coffee, go to 1775coffee.com, use code STUDIO for 15% off, and start your morning with coffee that stands for something. Oh, and every dollar spent enters you to win a Cybertruck and $30,000 cash. All right, let's keep going.
All right, let's hit the jaws and bring in our guest.
All right, joining us is Caleb Maupin. He's a widely acclaimed speaker, writer, and journalist, and a political analyst. He's traveled extensively throughout the Middle East and Latin America, was involved with the Occupy Wall Street movement from its early planning stages, and has been involved in many struggles for social justice. He's an outspoken advocate of international friendship and cooperation, as well as 21st century socialism. He's the founder and ideological leader of the Center for Political Innovation. Caleb, thanks for joining us here on the TMI Show.
Sure. Glad to be here. Good to see you both.
Good to have you.
Good to see you. Caleb, what is your drink of choice when you're traveling all over the world?
Well, everyone knows on my channel we talk about unnamed diet beverage because I'm not receiving any sponsorship.
Yes.
There's a certain diet beverage that I have with me, unless I'm planning to sleep in the next few hours. So as it's morning, I am chugging it away.
For the caffeine, caffeine content.
For the caffeine and for the taste. I never developed a taste for coffee, for some reason. But diet beverage, the caffeine, and I like to cut it with ice, make it a little, less
But on the plane, don't you want to not be awake on the plane and just kind of...
well, if it's a long flight, that's a different story. But, but for the most part, wherever I go, I try to drink. In some countries, it's Coke Light. Right, rather than depending on the country, but that's what I drink.
So there you go. Yeah, well, that is a popular drink on all airplanes. And of course, let me show some of these books. Caleb has, according to Amazon, 21 titles to your name.
Well, it's interesting. I've started taking chapters from my bigger books and turning them into smaller books because you can do that now very efficiently. So that's why the title count is going up because I've taken smaller, chapters and made them into full length books because it makes it easier for folks and
I see.
You can do that very efficiently now. So yeah, good time.
So it's like you can have it's like doing a clip from a long podcast or something.
Right. And people often go through Amazon looking for different topics. I've written a lot about, different historical things and stuff like that. So,
this one is the latest one, right? The danger of an American years of lead.
Yeah, well, originally it was called The Murder of Brian Thompson and the Danger of an American Years of Lead, but then Amazon wouldn't allow that because it was a recent tragic event, they said. So that was my book about the Luigi Mangione case, basically, and my assessment of that whole thing, which now, I mean, they're trying to give him the death penalty, right? So we're going to be seeing quite a bit of that case. And then, my thesis is that this is an intelligence operation, that it's similar to the years of lead. I'm referencing the years of lead in Italy, when Italy was going to leave NATO. And so there was an effort to intensify political violence in the country that led to the status quo kind of holding on to power because people were afraid to get involved in politics. And, Italy was subjected to 2 decades of extreme political violence with the CIA funding both sides, fascists, communists, Red Brigades, all of that. And it's interesting in light of this recent development with this young man. I believe it was in Wisconsin. I was in Wisconsin. This young man tried to kill his parents, or he did kill his parents, and he had a plot to kill Trump. But now we find out he was in touch with Ukrainian intelligence, and he was going to try and target the president or carry out some kind of violent attack and blame it on Russia. Did you see this? That's the latest.
Yes.
I did see that.
And that he was going to flee to Ukraine, he thought.
Yeah, I mean, this is crazy, and that I've argued that there is kind of an operation going on to normalize and accept political violence. And in that particular book, I talk about how the very same folks who said that the Medicare for All marches that Jimmy Dore was promoting were just this unacceptable, unforgivable, awful thing, a red-brown alliance. How dare you march in the streets? How dare you call out AOC and all of this? These Medicare for All marches were unacceptable, but shooting somebody down on the streets of Manhattan, that's just absolutely awesome, and we should make you a hero for doing that. I don't understand why is peaceful organizing unforgivable, but murder by standard legal definition is okay. I'm not saying I think Luigi is necessarily guilty. I have questions about the legality of the case, and I think he is innocent until proven guilty. And I even wonder if they didn't just grab a really good looking guy and make him the poster child for this whole thing, because the details of how he was apprehended don't make sense to me. So if he was such a if he was so good as to go into Manhattan, which is the most surveilled place in the country, carry out a shooting, get away, and get all the way to Altoona, Pennsylvania, and are we then to believe that he was so stupid then to leave his manifesto on the table at McDonald's? And leave his gun on the table at McDonald's and just hang out in McDonald's? Is that what you do after you flee from Manhattan?
Right. Or that you carry all of your murder paraphernalia in the backpack that you brought all the way with you to Pennsylvania.
Yeah, including the murder weapon.
Yeah, something doesn't add up, right? And he's good enough to escape from Manhattan, but then he's stupid enough to just hang out in McDonald's with all the evidence. Like, that doesn't make sense to me. So I'm not saying he's guilty, but I don't agree. And I'm urging people to not romanticize and celebrate political violence. It's just not a good thing. And that we do need people to get involved and get politically active, and escalating to a culture where people are afraid of getting shot is not going to help bring the struggle for justice in the United States to a good place. That's what I argue.
Just to play devil's advocate here a little bit, because basically I agree with you. What about like a situation like, say, the French Resistance, where they assassinated occupation soldiers and Vichy functionaries? And they were like, that's political violence, right? I mean, people
that's a situation
do stuff like that here.
Where you have no choice. I mean, your ability to peacefully organize in occupied France was completely non-existent. You were under occupation. There was a war going on. Jews were being rounded up and taken to prison camps. The first thing they did when they got to France was round up any political dissidents, any outspoken leftists. And so they were underground organizing, doing whatever they could. But we would prefer a peaceful transition, and we would prefer to build a peaceful movement while we can. Now, when the road to peace is cut off, that's a different situation, right? I think like Luigi's defenders would probably argue that there's no peaceful, nothing would work, right? Like to affect change. Not that killing, that guy from United Healthcare
affected any change at all. But, they would just argue that there's nothing, Bernie tried, nothing's happening. So.
Well, they're on tour. He and AOC. So.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Well, their tour. It's amusing. Their tour is called Fighting Oligarchy or Opposing Oligarchy, something like that, right?
Yeah. It's called Fight Oligarchy. Yeah.
Fight Oligarchy. But then their whole thing is they're opposing authoritarianism. They're saying that Trump is being authoritarian, and that's just a false dichotomy, because in the history of this country, all the presidents that have effectively fought oligarchy have been authoritarian, like Lincoln, Roosevelt. They all tried to stuff the Supreme Court. They all took very dramatic moves, and they were able to fight oligarchy and win great victories. So if you want to fight oligarchy, you need authoritarianism. And if you oppose authoritarianism, then the oligarchy kind of wins by default. The oligarchy are the people that win by default because they have the most money. So the whole dichotomy, it's very odd the way they're framing it. They're trying to weaken the institution of the presidency in the name of fighting oligarchy, but that's just, it's not how things work.
I definitely see your point there. Now let's pivot, Caleb, to the whole issue of these Iran talks, these alleged. Ted and I were poking fun of, like, Trump announcing it while Bibi Netanyahu was sitting in the Oval Office. Bibi kind of looks at him like, "You're doing what?" But then we find out that they don't really have actual face-to-face talks, that they have an intermediary running back and forth between hotel rooms or conference rooms or whatever. But, this is, I would say, an effort to revive a new version of the JCPOA, which Trump 1.0 unilaterally withdrew the U.S. from. Now he seems to be wanting to revive it. And then on the news of last night, breaking that allegedly Trump, thwarted Israel's plans of striking major airstrikes deep inside Tehran in May. How does all of this comport for you? Does it all make sense? Because I know you've traveled there, you've done a lot of extensive journalism work there. How does all this compute?
Well, there's a number of things that need to be said about this, which is, the first thing that needs to be said is that Iran, their position has always been that they don't want a nuclear weapon. That has always been their position. And at no point have they ever been in violation of the Non-Proliferation Treaty. They signed the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, and there are International Atomic Energy Agency inspectors in Iran that monitor every nuclear power site. And they have never at any point been found in violation of it. So the idea that Iran is every day plotting to get a bomb and all of that, no, they're not. They have peaceful nuclear energy. Now, if they feel threatened, they could, in theory, pull out of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty like North Korea did, and then begin to proliferate. But they have not done that. And their current position and their religious teaching and other things says that they should not do that. And people want to obscure this. They say, well, Caleb, doesn't Iran have the right to have nuclear weapons? That's not the issue, right? And that it's kind of like, they say that, the police shot an African-American man for reaching for his wallet, right? They said, well, they thought his wallet was a gun and they shot him, right? Would it be right then to say, well, he had the right to have a gun? Well, that's not the issue, right? Because the point is he didn't have a gun, right? And that when people bring up, well, Iran has the right to have nuclear weapons, well, they did sign the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. As of now, they say they don't want to have nuclear weapons. So, bringing up, well, they have the right to have them and all that kind of obscures the issue. But that said, that has been their position. But they have been subjected to huge amounts of horror. When I was in Iran, and I made a documentary. If you go to the website of my organization, Center for Political Innovation, cpiusa.org, you can actually watch the film I made in Iran. When I was there in 2015, I made a documentary film. And one of the things I do in that film is I visited the graveyard where there are 5 nuclear scientists who were murdered. These are guys who worked on the nuclear power plants in Iran that were murdered by Mossad, by Israel, in coordination with the Mujahideen Khalq, the terrorist group. And they murdered these 5 nuclear scientists. One of them was a professor, and he was on his way to teach his college physics class. And they and they killed him just in the middle of the street, gunned him down.
It was a crazy operation. They used a
remote
controlled
murder against a scientist, a scientist, not a military guy, a scientist.
Right.
Who was, and that happened. That's just absolutely crazy. And Iran has been subjected to all this persecution because they want to engage in what the JCPOA and the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty say is their right, which is their right to have nuclear power plants, which they have the right to have. And Israel has just decided, well, you don't have the right to have nuclear power plants. And if you start to develop nuclear power plants, even in full compliance with the treaty, we're going to accuse you of trying to get nuclear weapons, being a threat to us, and we're going to attack you and murder your scientists and put sanctions on you. So we have to put that in the kicker and understand that context. Now, as far as the Iran nuclear deal, I mean, there's plenty we could get into there. And I will say, Biden said he was going to get the USA back into the Iran nuclear deal. That was his platform. Mm-hmm. It didn't happen, right? The 4 years of Biden's presidency, the USA did not move toward improving. Whereas Trump is the guy who ripped up the Iran nuclear deal and then murdered Qasem Soleimani, the national military hero of Iran, afterwards during his first term. Mm-hmm. But it appears that Iran, is now in indirect talks with the United States. So Netanyahu was going to attack Iran. Trump stopped it. And now Iran and the United States are indirectly negotiating. I think that's a really important development because if Israel had gone ahead and attacked Iran that way, that would have been World War III. But Trump stopped it. And apparently now Trump is doing what Biden said he was going to do and never did, which is resuming negotiations. So I think, again, I'm not approving of a lot of what Trump is doing. There's a lot of things Trump is doing that are not good, but I do maintain we're slightly better off with him than we would have been with Kamala Harris. We did have a 30-day ceasefire. And it appears that, Israel was blocked from going ahead and attacking Iran, and we're now negotiating. And I hope that we can de-escalate this situation and we can get some kind of agreement where Iran is not threatened. Iran is able to continue their use of peaceful nuclear energy. That would be great. And I hope that some kind of agreement can be reached. But ideally, Iran does have the right to peaceful nuclear energy, but as signatories of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, they can't get nuclear weapons. And if we can find a way that can remain the situation, they're able to continue their peaceful nuclear energy, but it's clear they won't get nuclear weapons, and Israel will allow that. That would be the ideal outcome. I'm curious what's going on in these negotiations.
Well, there's even talk that they want to move toward normalized relations, right? I mean, the rumor is that Trump has always had a desire to get a Nobel Peace Prize for himself, especially after Obama got his, and that that he needs a win on the foreign policy front. It could be in Ukraine, negotiating peace there. It could be normalized, but I don't think with Iran it's going to be enough to just go back to the JCPOA or something like that. You're not going to get a Nobel Peace Prize for that. For that, you're going to have to actually negotiate peace, or maybe you do it with between the Israelis and the Palestinians. Although I don't see how at this point. But do you think that's a pipe dream or?
Well, I think the first step, and this is a hard one, and I have a hard time seeing this happening, but it's really necessary. Trump needs to apologize for murdering Qasem Soleimani because Qasem Soleimani is the national hero of Iran. He was imagine a cross between George Washington and Whitney Houston or something. He was like the national
kind of, right?
Yeah, he was the national hero, and he was also the national celebrity. And he was killed in a very cowardly way. He went to Iran to negotiate peace talks. He went to Iraq to negotiate peace talks, and on his way home from the airport, his car was hit with a drone and he was murdered. And Iran was just filled with outrage to have the national hero killed in that way. And if there's going to be any progress, if the supreme leader of Iran is going to be able to convince the Iranian people to support him in signing some kind of new deal with the United States, there needs to be an understanding that the USA, at least on some level, recognizes that was not the right thing to do. And that's going to be a tough one, but I think that's just essential. And I think if Trump can say, look, the people who advised Trump to do it are all people that Trump has now considered to be traitors, for example, John Bolton, like Mike Pompeo, the people that have been stripped of their security clearances. So Trump can come forward and say, look, the people who gave me the information, they didn't tell me everything, I was misled. And I think that would be an ideal thing for Trump to do, and that could lead to things moving ahead.
So, Caleb, the New York Times, their latest article from about this matter last night, they wrote, in a statement delivered in Hebrew after the meeting, Mr. Netanyahu said that an agreement with Iran would only work if it allowed the signers to, quote, go in, blow up the facilities, dismantle all the equipment under American supervision with American execution. So he's basically saying, we want to do, we Israel want to do whatever we want to do. And to some degree, we're gonna go on a long leash and do it. But if there's a deal to be made, then we need America's full support. Do you foresee any of that happening? That Iran is gonna sign on board and be like, okay, Americans and Israelis and whoever else, like, come in here and blow up all of our facilities?
Yeah, Israel will never be okay with Iran existing. I mean, it's just Iran exists as a country that had an anti-colonial, anti-imperialist revolution in 1979.
Does it work the other way? Is Iran okay with Israel existing?
No, Iran says that Israel is an illegitimate country, is a settler country, a Jewish state that violates the rights of the Palestinians, and so vice versa. There is going to be antagonism there, but I think the United States is a third party country that, while the USA is firmly in Israel's camp, the USA has the potential to perhaps mediate something, but I don't think Israel is going to. First of all, let's point out, that Israel has hundreds of nuclear weapons, and they have never signed the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. And so U.S. aid to Israel is illegal under the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, because you cannot give any aid to a country that has nuclear weapons and hasn't signed the treaty under the treaty. So our aid to Israel is completely illegal under the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. Israel is the only country in the Middle East that has nuclear weapons. They've got hundreds of them, and they've proliferated them. And because they don't officially acknowledge that they have nuclear weapons, that's like a loophole. It's like, oh, well, we don't, hear no evil, see no evil. And that's the loophole how the West, kind of lets Israel proliferate their nuclear weapons. So that's the context we have to understand. I'm not surprised, but the idea that Iran would just destroy all of its nuclear facilities, they did that already. That's what they did with the JCPOA, the Iran nuclear deal of 2015. That's what they did. They did pretty much get rid of all of their nuclear power plants, and the result was more sanctions and their top general being killed. So why would they do that all over again? And they are expanding their peaceful nuclear energy program. And they are also saying, there's a subtle hint that, if Iran did feel like they were going to be invaded or something, they would probably pull out of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty and get nuclear weapons to deter an invasion. They don't want to do that, and their official position is that they would not do that, right? But they, by increasing their peaceful nuclear energy capacity, they're hinting that they could do that if they felt they were threatened. And that's kind of the game that's played here. There's an element of bluffing and, and that's the whole tragedy of this whole situation. And the USA, I will say, Iraq did not have weapons of mass destruction. They were invaded. Libya got rid of their weapons of mass destruction, and look what happened to them. And North Korea has said, look, we got nuclear weapons and we're safe. The United States made an offer to North Korea in the 90s. Bill Clinton made a deal with them. Don't get nuclear weapons, and we'll give you all this heating gas and all this food aid. And then Congress cut off the funds for the deal. And so North Korea said, all right, we might get nuclear weapons. We're thinking about it. And then Bush gave his Axis of Evil speech after 9/11. And then they said, okay. And they got nuclear weapons. So, if you want to talk about all this, the USA doesn't really have a good record of credibility here when it comes to making deals with countries to not get weapons.
Right now, the North Koreans are looking pretty smart.
Yeah, and they've said that. Look, they said, look, Libya, look, Iraq, look at us, so that's something to think about.
What about this here on the screen that we're seeing? So the Saudi, what was his, the Saudi defense minister, just the other day, traveled to Tehran, which, the Saudis and the Iranians just normalized relations in the last couple of years. They're just warming up to each other again. And so now we have the defense minister in Tehran. Do you foresee the Saudis stepping in to kind of make peace, especially with MBS? I think it's safe to say he's assumed the throne effectively, right? He's effectively the leader of Saudi Arabia. He's got big plans for his country in the coming years. Do you foresee them possibly playing the role of peace broker here, especially in the way that, when you look over the past 10 years and the devastation that was taking place in Yemen and the huge role that the Saudis and the Emiratis played in devastating that country over the last decade, now they want to play peace broker? Does that make any sense?
Well, it does, because the strategy of the Obama administration and the first Trump administration was to polarize the Muslim world between Sunni and Shia, right? Because Iran is a Shia country, and Iran, comes out of this anti-colonial revolution. It aligned itself with Syria. It's aligned with Hezbollah in Lebanon and with the Houthis and others. And whereas Saudi Arabia is a Sunni country, they're Wahhabis, very conservative. And the idea was that, they would divide. And there was a lot of propaganda about a Shia crescent, about Iran is trying to take over the Middle East with this Shia crescent, and et cetera. And that was the strategy. But now, in the context of everything that's happened since October 7th, at this point, the entire Muslim world is united in opposition to Israel. And so the idea of playing Sunnis against Shias, it's not working, especially when Iran and its allies are seen as the main enemies of Israel. And all the Muslims of the world, and especially in the Middle East region, are very outraged by what Israel's doing. And everyone can see that it's the Houthis that are aligned with Iran that are stopping ships, and it's Hezbollah, and it's the Iranians. And so at this point, hating Iran is just not a selling point. In terms of dividing the world. And, Saudi Arabia and Iran reestablished diplomatic relations because of China. China facilitated those negotiations and brought the two countries together because Saudi Arabia and Iran both sell oil to China. China buys oil from both countries, and it has important diplomatic and trade relationships with both countries. And in the context of everything going on at this point, the Muslim world is pretty united against Israel. And as a result, Saudi Arabia, they're not really able to position themselves, and sell themselves to the Muslim world if they go to head with Iran, because Iran is seen as fighting Israel, and Israel is the main enemy. So Netanyahu has effectively united the Muslims of the world and kind of undermined what Obama and I guess the first Trump administration were really trying to do in polarizing the Muslim world. And that's the important thing to remember.
Yeah, I think it's going to be an interesting next few weeks, given that the reports, at least from the New York Times, purportedly the would-be strikes by Israel were planned for May, which obviously is not here yet. Don't know when, but it's been months in the making. But Caleb, we know that Israel oftentimes goes rogue against what the U.S. says. So there's no guarantee that this has been waved off, and that that it's yay safety, nobody's getting bombed.
Aren't the Israelis like always 5 seconds away from bombing the Iranians? It's like it's kind of like they could do it any second, anytime. Like, what's special about May? Like, we're going to plan this?
I don't know.
They could snap their finger and just do it tomorrow.
The thing was that allegedly the idea was that Netanyahu breaks the news to Trump, and Trump says, I don't want to talk about this on the phone. Come to the White House. Let's have a talk mano a mano at the White House. So hence, we see them chatting at the White House. And they allow the press pool to be in the Oval for like more than an hour, which I think also we should reflect on the time that that the Ukrainian president, or so-called president, Volodymyr Zelensky, was there. Another time that he allowed the press to be there, because he kind of in my view, when Zelensky was there, he wanted the press to be there to let the press see the mask come off. And because with time, that's bound to happen, right? Because normally these White House events, I've been to them, they let the press pull in there for 5, 10, 15 minutes at most, and then they usher you out. They shoo you out. And we saw with Zelensky, they were in there for over an hour with the press. With Netanyahu, same thing this time. The press was allowed to hang out in there for over an hour inside the Oval Office. And I thought, gosh, this is going on a long time. Is he trying to do the same thing with Netanyahu that he did with Zelensky, where he's going to allow the mask to come off? But the difference is Netanyahu has been at this game for 35 years, whereas Zelensky's been doing this for like 5. So Netanyahu knows what he's doing. So he keeps his poker face. So when Trump, tells him that we need to, talk about peace and not have you bomb Iran in May, I think that was after the press pool left, that I'm not convinced that anything was thwarted, because how many times have we seen the state of Israel tell the U.S. president, I don't care who it is, just fill in the shoes, U.S. president, we're not going to do XYZ. And then 5 minutes later, they go do XYZ. And they come back and it's not really tucking tail, but they're, they abide by the rules of it's easier to ask for forgiveness than permission. And I feel like that's something that we're looking at here. And he's going to force Donald Trump to be in a position to back Israel after they, commit a sinister crime such as bombing Tehran.
Well, Israel has done that in the past. They bombed Iraq in 1981 and destroyed their peaceful nuclear energy facilities. Actually murdered a French citizen along with a number of Iraqis when they did that. So I'm not saying that Israel wouldn't do such a thing. I do think, though, that on the one hand, Netanyahu is in a little bit of a weak position because within Israeli politics, he's losing popularity very fast, and that he does want to prolong the confrontation and keep the killing since October 7th going as long as he can in order to hold on to power. But it also appears that Donald Trump has an element of leverage over Netanyahu that the previous administration didn't have. Kamala Harris and Joe Biden were never able to get a 30-day ceasefire. There was not a single ceasefire from October 7th until the day Trump took office, and then we had a 30-day ceasefire. And it seems like Trump is able to say no to Netanyahu in ways that the previous administration was not. And that I find to be inspiring and interesting. Trump is doing a lot of theatrical performative things for Israel's benefit, like, targeting these Palestine students, kicking people out of the country because they protested and stuff. But in terms of what Israel actually wants, he's doing what Israel doesn't want. He's negotiating with Iran. He's making a ceasefire happen. He's doing things that are defying Israel's in ways that the Biden administration and the Obama administration never did. And I find that to be very interesting. And it seems like there are a lot of people in the Trump camp that are Israel supporters, hardline Netanyahu supporters, and he's trying to please those people performatively, while he kind of takes moves that kind of are not what Israel is demanding. And I find that to be very, very interesting.
Yeah. And producer Robbie's got a question for you. I'm going to pop him on the screen.
Howdy, Caleb.
Hey.
Yeah, I just have a quick question for you. Can Trump defy the Israel lobby and actually make peace with Iran? Because let's face it. They have AIPAC. They own Congress. They do. That's a statement of fact. And Trump has a lot of political enemies in Congress. So if Trump does try to make peace, could the AIPAC and the Jewish lobby at large pressure Congress to maybe impeach Trump a third time because of his, for example, his ignoring the Supreme Court, saying you're overstepping your power, and strip away of basically use impeachment as a cudgel, as a club to beat Trump into submission kill any idea of peace and get the war that Israel wants? That's my question.
Well, that's interesting because that brings to mind the fact that when Trump did murder Qasem Soleimani, he was under impeachment. You remember that? Yeah. He was facing impeachment at that time, and it was almost like he was doing that to perform to the Israel lobby and show them, how supportive he was. And it's possible, but Trump has survived multiple impeachments before, and I feel like the MAGA base is going to stay loyal to him. And that's kind of what a lot of people don't realize, is that the MAGA base is not loyal to Israel. There are certain people in the MAGA camp that are loyal to Israel, but your typical Trump supporter throughout America doesn't really care that much about Israel.
That's me.
Yeah. And so Trump, I feel like he's in a much stronger position to defy Israel than any president we've ever had since 1948, really.
I agree with you. I agree with you in terms of the base, but I mean, Congress is owned by AIPAC. So that's the club, because with the midterms, a year and a half away. Can Trump defy the Israel lobby and survive?
I think he can, but it would be tough. And I don't know if he will. I can't guarantee that he will, but I think he has the ability more than any previous president. It would just be an act of political bravery, is what it would be. I mean, it would be a real profile in political courage if Trump was to just kind of tell Israel to shove it, and just say, look, I want to go down in history as a deal maker. Obama made a deal with Iran that I called a bad deal. I made a new deal, and Israel just has to deal with it. I think that would be a bold move on Trump's part. And I think he could do it, but it would require him to push back because, there's this whole apparatus. They talk about conservatainment, right. The Daily Wire, I believe, just filed for bankruptcy, if I'm not mistaken. Right. But, there's this whole apparatus that's been created that might want peace with Russia and might be a little less, pro-war. But when it comes to Israel, nope, Israel can do whatever it wants. End of story. And that's a big part of what people who support Trump listen to, is they listen to those voices, and those voices are very controlled. There is not any room for criticism of Israel in the conservatainment complex, so to speak. However, read the comments, right? Your typical Alex Jones listener has no love for Israel, and there's such a big gap between what your typical MAGA person believes and what the MAGA official voices say when it comes to Israel.
There's a huge split. There's a huge split.
I don't understand why Trump appointed so many pro-Israel people if he wants to do a work around Israel, though, right? Like, why not have some people at the table who are not into Israel?
Yeah, well, I'm reminded of, the first election that I was like politically aware. I was a teenager, 2004. That was the election between George W. Bush and John Kerry. And that year, Pat Buchanan said the election was really Michael Moore versus Mel Gibson, because the two big movies that came out that summer were Passion of the Christ and Fahrenheit 9/11. But what you'll notice about both Mel Gibson and Michael Moore was both of them were anti-Israel, right? Michael Moore dedicated his book, Dude, Where's My Country, to Rachel Corrie, who was murdered by the Israelis. And Mel Gibson, he's when he gets a little bit of alcohol in him, he'll tell you what he really thinks about Israel. And he's told some police officers and other people, and he's quite anti-Israel also. So, and that kind of showed that while both Bush and Kerry were huge supporters of Israel and they were the official candidates, the base that was rallied to watch Fahrenheit 9/11, they were anti-Israel. And the base that was rallied to watch Passion of the Christ, they were anti-Israel. And that, this is like the elephant in the room. Israel has a grip over our political establishment in America, but below the surface, everybody knows that on the left and the right, people are just tired of Israel having this kind of power. And I think there are a lot of Americans, they're not like vehement anti-Israel activists. They don't want Israel to be destroyed. They'd probably agree that it has the right to exist, but they just don't like it having, this free pass over our politics.
Yes, the influence.
Yeah. It's something that everyone's kind of annoyed with. And every so often I've noticed that Trump and the previous administration, Obama and Biden, every so often they do something that's like a little dig. It's just a little FU to Israel. Have you ever noticed this? Like there's, the Trump administration, they'll do like little things where like they'll, I believe it was on Holocaust Remembrance Day, they gave a proclamation that left Jews out, that didn't mention Jews. And it's like, That's not an accident. That was done on purpose. And right as Obama was leaving office, John Kerry gave a speech where he said he said Israel can be democratic or Jewish. It can't be both. And that was like clearly, intended to be, he was saying that, but that was like taken out of context, and that was like a little dig. And then every so often, like both sides will give little jabs, and people ask questions, the Bill Clinton Lewinsky scandal, right? Monica Lewinsky had gone to Israel like every summer. She would go into Israeli summer camps and all of that. And, everybody knew she was Bill Clinton's type, so to speak. And she ended up working in the White House and being very close to where he was, and that whole thing happened. And the whole thing with Linda Tripp and her connections. And the whole thing is very, very interesting when you look into it. And, the Epstein, right? What happened with that? It seemed like Epstein had a lot of people within the political apparatus of the United States under blackmail. And then he ended up, I guess, killing himself in prison.
Suicided.
Yeah, he was, but he's no longer a factor, right? I mean, he's gone. He's out of the picture. And there's a lot of people that look at that whole thing and say, what was going on there? And Epstein certainly had his connections. And we're in a new ballpark. And this is the elephant in the room, is the amount of power that Israel has over the political apparatus in the United States. And a lot of people are not happy about it on the left and on the right. I will say, when it came to the protests that happened at Columbia University, where I'm at in New York City, at Harvard, and around the country, I agreed with what they were saying, which is no U.S. support for Israel. But I vehemently disagreed with the way they were framing it. They should have framed it as money for jobs and schools in America, not weapons for Israel. They should have said America first. Instead, I went to those protests, and they were dominated by the woke left. And the message was, America is an evil, racist country, just like Israel. And Americans are evil, racists, white settlers, etc. And it was framed almost in a way that was almost a gift to Israel, in that it made it sound like the people who hate Israel also hate Americans. And it should have been a populist appeal. It should have been an appeal to the American people, but they didn't do it that way. It was done in this kind of woke, white privilege, whatever politics. It was very odd. And then the other thing was, there was a real emphasis on the LGBT aspect, which, Hamas is not pro-LGBT. I mean, they're just not, Iran and those countries, they're just not into that stuff. It's just not. So Netanyahu was able to just kind of lampoon them for that, and it was very odd. And that, really populism is what everyone's afraid of. We're all being told that populism is the most dangerous thing, right? But populism is what we need now. And the left has really been inoculated against populism. And the right talks in the name of populism, but the policies of the right are very much free market, anti-collectivist, libertarian policies. I mean, the Doge, Elon Musk's Doge, you can't cut your way into economic growth. It just doesn't work that way. You get rid of the good paying jobs of thousands of government employees, and you're going to have worse economic results. You can't cut your way into economic growth.
No.
Sorry, I lost the screen there for a second. So we've taken up a lot of your time, which I appreciate you affording us.
Sure. Well, hey, I wrote a book about the Houthis, right? If you read any book that I've written, it's very short, but it's about who the people in Yemen that the USA is bombing right now, who they are, where their movement came from. You'll learn a lot from this book. There's very, very little that's been written on this, but this is a short piece. Who are the Houthis? What are they fighting for? And you will learn about a movement of the poorest people, some of the poorest people in the world, who have made themselves very, very powerful by standing up to Israel in a way that no other force has. And I think we as Americans can learn a lot from the history of the Houthi movement.
They're badasses.
They are, and they are an anti-austerity movement. They're a movement demanding economic growth. It was against cuts in public services. It was poor people coming together in the name of their religion to demand the economic development of their country. So check out my book on the Houthis. If you read one thing I've ever written, read my book on the Houthis. We've got thousands of copies of this book. We printed it in bulk, and we're distributing it all over the Chicago area with a poster for the convention that we're having July 12th in Chicago. Both of you are invited, by the way, if you're available. And we are having a gathering July 12th in Chicago called Working Families First, Defeat the Deep State, for a new world of peace and innovation. And we're gathering different people. Garland Nixon is coming. Scott Ritter is going to be there. It's going to be quite a gathering. And so we are trying to kind of build a movement of working people against imperialism, for a rebirth of America on new principles, breaking out of imperialism and for a whole new world. So that's what I'm all about. And I appreciate you all having me on here, and you're doing great things on the channel. Robbie is a great guy, and it's good to get to know Robbie, and you guys are doing good stuff. And I believe I'm going to be talking to Ted on Tuesday about your new book, so I'm looking forward to that as well. So wild times.
Authors, you guys, all these authors, I need to get on board with doing some sort of a book. I don't know what. I'm gonna take a page out of Seinfeld and do a coffee table book about a coffee table, and it's gonna have legs. So
the coffee table book
about coffee tables. Just has it been done? I don't know. Maybe we'll add some. Maybe all the dictators of the world and what their coffee tables look like. I'm just saying. Yeah. Everybody's got coffee tables, Ted. Everybody has to have coffee tables.
I think books about dictators are inherently fascinating. Dictators are inherently fascinating.
I jokingly, I probably shouldn't have joked about it. Many years ago, when Muammar Gaddafi was killed, I was auditioning for something, and obviously I actually have tremendous respect for what he did for Libya. Right?
Oh, no question.
Tremendous respect. But the gig I was going in for, I think it was like a Comedy Central thing years ago. And it wasn't too long after Gaddafi died. And I made a quip about, that we should do a House of Style. And this tells you how old this is, like a House of Style type MTV type thing about world dictators. And maybe Muammar Gaddafi was one of them. May he rest in peace with his, his whole outfits. And I said, yeah, in Afghanistan, it went right over their heads. The Comedy Central people, right over their heads. Didn't get it.
I liked his Kung Fu Fighting Babes.
That's pretty cool. When you have,
his thing was robes, right? He wore like elaborate robes and stuff.
He did, but then he was flanked by all those beautiful armed security women.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Kung Fu Fighting Babes. They were like something out of a Tarantino movie.
Well, I thought it was neat. Also, he had like a necklace that he wore that had the image of Omar Mukhtar on it. And Omar Mukhtar was the hero of Libya that fought against Italy, when fascist Italy was the occupier of Italy. There was this guy, Omar Mukhtar. And when he signed diplomatic relations with Italy, he made a point of wearing this big, huge golden necklace with the face of Omar Mukhtar on there. To make a statement. I thought that was very, very cool. And he sponsored a Hollywood movie in the 80s called Lion in the Desert about the life of Omar Mukhtar.
I heard that.
Yeah, go watch Lion in the Desert. It's a really good movie that he paid for. He basically just dished out the cash. He also, it was funny, when I was in Iran, there's a movie called The Message, which is about the life of the Prophet Muhammad. I had never seen it. And when I was in Iran, people are like, it's kind of like in The Message. And I said, what is that? I've never seen it. And they're like, you've never seen The Message? How? Everyone in the Muslim world has seen this movie, The Message, like 20 times. It is like the movie. It's like The Wizard of Oz in the Muslim world. It was paid for by Gaddafi. In the 70s, he wanted to make a movie about the life of Prophet Muhammad. So he made The Message. And it's like everyone in Saudi, it's on Saudi TV like 3 times a day or something like that. It's like the most Muslim movie ever. But if you watch it, and I did actually then go and watch it, it's interesting because it's an Islamic film, but it's very much like influenced by communism. It's almost like communism was very popular in the 70s. And so it's like it's trying to sell Islam to people who might become communists. It's kind of interesting. It's like there's a lot of emphasis on the Prophet believing in women's rights and fighting for poor people. And it's like a social justice case for Islam, kind of. It's interesting. And that kind of represented where Gaddafi was at. He was, it was the Green Book. He called it the third universal theory, Islamic communism or whatever. That was kind of where he was at. So that's interesting. And that's his lasting legacy. Like every Muslim child has seen The Message, like, every time, over and over and over again. So it's interesting. Gaddafi threw his money around in interesting ways. Certainly. I hear stories of the Black Panthers back in the early 70s. They would, there'd be a knock on the door of their office, and they would open the door, and there'd be a guy in a suit, a Libyan diplomat, and he would say, "This is for you," and he would just hand them a suitcase and like shove it into their hands. They'd open it, it'd be just cash, $100 bills.
The 70s, man.
Yeah. So
before our time, Caleb, I would have liked to have seen that. But yeah, the whole point of my little story about Comedy Central was they didn't get my jokes. They didn't get, because they didn't understand the deep politics behind it. So, it was a little too deep, too inside.
Shockingly,
baseball.
Comedy Central did not understand the deep comedy, historical, socio-political context.
Because at the time, Jon Stewart was still on air, and that show was hugely popular.
Yeah.
So
stick close to your desk and never go to sea, and you can be the ruler of the Queen's Navy.
So they thought they wanted to do something political, and they're auditioning different. It was just kind of broad and all over the place. And so I had some pitches, and I had some, and they did not understand at all what I was saying about Muammar Gaddafi. So it goes to show that they didn't really have the people that the masses are consuming their infotainment from. The people that are the writers and the people that are putting these shows to, the producers, didn't actually have. That's what my takeaway was. They didn't actually have a deep understanding of politics, but yet they are putting out these politics infotainment comedy shows. So that was my takeaway. I went, oh, tough room. So
no, but that's why they're there. I used to work at the UN press corps, right? I was the correspondent of the United Nations for Press TV from Iran. And I was part of the UN Correspondent Association. And I would go to these like receptions with people from ABC and Fox and all of that. And I would be like, they would talk to me and they'd be like, you work for Iran? Like, what, and I would talk to them. They had no idea there were two sides to the war in Syria, no idea about Ukraine, any of this stuff. And I'd be like, they all went to Harvard and Yale and Stanford and all the best colleges. And they don't know shit. I mean, they don't care, right? And I realized that's why they're there. American education is basically you learn to be obedient, and the more obedient you are, the higher you get. So it's frustrating.
These writers, these like Comedy Central writers or whatever, that are supposed to do political comedy. Like some of them went to Harvard, some of them went to Juilliard. They're trained and academic in artsy person. And here they did not understand anything I was saying about the Middle East. And so I went, all right, I'm not getting a call back. Okay, thanks for your time. So that was the end of it. So there you go. So now, here we are. Fast forward 12, 15 years later.
But you're Washington Post famous.
That's right. I'm the one that they love to drag through the mud, WAPO does. Whenever they talk about RT. So
well, thanks for dragging me with you. Thanks for bringing me into
I love it, Caleb.
Well.
I love it. Badge of honor. Thank you so much. Caleb, I'm putting your CPI website down there at the bottom of the screen. Go check out Caleb's stuff. You're a brave man to dare to go into Chicago in the yucky summer.
Well, it's early, right? It's June?
July 12th.
It'll be hot.
That's mid. Oh, no.
Yeah, it'll be hot.
Oof.
Well, we were just there. The Midwest Conference Center that we've rented has very good air conditioning.
Okay,
it's going to be huge. I mean, the room holds 500, so we have people. Nice. We're working very, very hard to fill that place. There's going to be an Uzbek dance team that will be performing. That we arranged. So that's going to be fun. So cultural entertainment.
So they could find information down there. Yes, at cpiusa.org.
Yes.
All right. Cool.
Thank you so much, Caleb. Always
Thanks,
good
Caleb.
to see you, my friend.
Yep. See you soon. Right, bye.
Thank you. All right, guys, that's going to do it for us. Hope you guys enjoyed this in-depth conversation with our buddy Caleb Maupin. We'll be back again tomorrow on Friday to wrap up the week. We'll be talking about China's economic numbers that came out earlier this week that shocked the world. I mean, I think their GDP was it showed over a 5% or somewhere around a 5% growth. Ted, that's massive in this era. Don't know if, the Trump tariffs are going to have a real impact on that. But we'll talk about that with our friend KJ No tomorrow. So we'll be talking about China as we travel around the world. And yes, the tariff war is still ongoing. So join us in the conversation tomorrow, 10 a.m. Eastern. Make sure you guys like and follow the show wherever you're consuming this content. Appreciate you guys being here. We are Audi 5000. Any last words, Ted?
Well, I hope they're not my last words, but
for the day,
they could be. You never know.
It could be.
It could be.
And also, I should note. Speaking of last words, remember we were talking about Virginia Giuffre? I looked it up just a moment ago. That she said I'm dying. I have 4 days exactly to live. Remember that?
Yeah. How's she doing?
Not dead.
Not dead yet. Not dead.
It's been 2 weeks. Homegirl ain't dead. I'm just Caleb brought up Epstein, so I thought, I should look up. Did Virginia Giuffre die? No.
Not so much. Well, we're happy that she was mistaken.
No, I'm glad. I'm just saying we thought it was kind of ridiculous 2 weeks ago that she's like, I have 4 days to live, and I am Instagramming this picture.
Maybe there's like 4 biblical days, like there's that God created the earth, the heaven and the earth in 7 days, but Catholics believe that those are epics.
Yes. So
or epochs, depending on your point of view.
Epoch. Anyway, Virginia Giuffre still alive. That's the last comment I'll make.
All right. Yeah. Well, so be good to one another, and we'll see you tomorrow.
See you at 10 a.m. Eastern. Adios, amigos. Thank you.